access 24/7. Check us out on YouTube, Facebook, and X. And for the premier sports talk experience, tap into our Roku channel. Start your mornings with Mac and Jack covering all the weekend sports action. Then pour a cup and enjoy all the sports you can drink on the Coffee and Sports podcast. At midday, talk sports from east to west on the Coast to Coast podcast. Followed at night by some hot girl talk with Prim and Proper Sports featuring Sonia Pearson. Talk boxing on the Gloved Fist. Yankee fans tune in for Start Spreading the News. And there's more on the College Sports Huddle and Sports Scope with Robert Butler. And that's just a sampling. There are 20 podcasts in all and 70 weekly shows giving us a 3.4-star viewer rating. To find us on Roku TV, search for National Streaming Sports on the Roku search bar. Click on the logo and you're in. For laptops, mobile phones, and tablets, download the Roku app. National Streaming Sports, live and on demand, sports talk for America. If you like the sweet science, get ready to talk boxing on the Gloved Fist podcast with top boxing writers Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch. Frank, a former amateur boxer out of Philadelphia, writes for NY Fights and can be seen on the Boxing Channel. Jack, an amateur boxer who competed in the New York Golden Gloves, was a 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association. And now, here's Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch.
And we're back. Welcome to Glove Fist. My name is Frank Latirzo, part-time writer, full-time observer, joined by former 6-term president of the National Boxing Writers Association, Mr. Jack Hirsch. Jack, Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah. How are you?
See, I'm silent. I'm speechless here. We're going into a new year now. I mean, you know what we should have maybe reviewed a little bit? We always briefly discuss, when you're not talking football, what we're going to talk about on this show. And one of the things, or I'm calling an audible order, so not to change what we're going to do, we're going to cover that in detail. Who's going to be the fight of the year at this point? I don't think there are any meaningful fights that could be a fight of the year or this or that coming up. I mean, the year's practically
no
over.
Runaway winners. I agree.
Yeah, I mean, who should get the Fight of the Year award? And I'll be honest about it, I haven't given it a lot of thought. You know, I'll sit down in a few days and really deeply think about it. What's the Fight of the Year, the Fight of the Year? And maybe it's a case of whoever goes last, like in a round in boxing.
Or who fights them both.
Like Usyk, for example, he just won a mega fight. If he won the same type of fight early in the year, which he actually did, okay, against Fury, he's done it twice. But if he fought, let's say, last January and then beat Fury again in June, it wouldn't carry the same weight as beating him in December, right before the year ends, where it's fresh in the voters' minds.
All right, we'll get to that, Jack. Let me just say this. Do you remember when Sonny Liston was asked about his fight with Cleveland Williams? It was the rematch. And he said, Cleveland had a beautiful first round and a terrible second.
I didn't remember that line, but it's a good one.
Okay, and that's what he said. Well, as far as my weekend goes, not counting the fight, I had a terrible Saturday, but a beautiful Sunday. And my terrible Saturday was this team I hate 24/7, the Ohio State Buckeyes, routed the Tennessee Volunteers, which I thought they were going to. And that had me down, even though I expected it. And again, I think Ohio State's going to win the whole thing. I want to be wrong, but that had me down. But, Jack, my beautiful Sunday happened when the Washington Redskins came back to beat the Philadelphia Eagles with 6 seconds left in the game. to keep the Eagles out of being the number 1 seed in the NFC. So that's my correlation to boxing. I had a terrible Saturday night and a beautiful Sunday.
You got 2 out of 3, Frank. The Miami Dolphins are still alive. And if they can somehow finagle themselves into the playoffs, I mean, with Tua back in form, Tyreek Hill correcting his problem with the drops, Jalen Waddle to throw to the running game, the defense coming around, they could cause a little damage in Miami.
Jack, but that's my problem. Why I have such a problem with the Dolphins, because it's always the same. We need to win out at the end, and we need to depend on other teams to win. If the Dolphins make the playoffs, they don't belong there, and they'll be exposed again and out in the first round if they make it. But they're not going to make it this year. The argument is going to be, does McDaniel survive the coach next year? And he probably will.
Okay.
Because the Dolphins are not a top flight organization like the Eagles. Anyhow.
Cut a deal now. Let Ohio State win the national championship if the Eagles could get eliminated in the first round of the playoffs. You'll cut that deal now.
I would hate to have to make that choice, with the devil, Jack. If he said, look, one of them is going to win, you're going to have to live with that. Who do you want to lose? I don't know. I don't know what I would do. I would say, I don't know. I'd flip a coin. It's that close. I probably want to see Ohio State lose.
You gave me the Sonny Liston line. I never heard that one before. That was kind of funny. I don't know if I mentioned it on the past show. One of the funniest lines I ever heard was Jerry Quarry when he knocked out Jack Bodell. The British press kept badgering him to say something about Bodell, what Bodell was doing really well. And Quarry wanted to be nice about the whole thing.
I didn't know him long enough.
That, when you knocked him down, I mean, what could you say? When he fell, he said, well, he fell awkwardly. That was about the best compliment he could give. They said, did you find Bodell to be awkward? And he said, yeah, well, he fell awkwardly. Oh.
I thought he said I didn't know him long enough.
Well, that's a good one there, too. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you a fighter that we've known a long time. And I don't know if we're done with him, Jack. He fought this weekend, but Tyson Fury had a second shot at Alexander Usyk and came up short again. I don't know where that leaves him. I forget who you picked, but my pick was Usyk just by default on Fury, where I think he's been on the slide for 2 or 3 years.
I settled on Fury at the end to eke out a close decision. I wrote it on one of your posts, Frank, too, the day of the fight. Originally, when their first fight ended, I told myself, I think Fury can win a rematch. He just has to sustain what he did in the first fight for one more round. And I thought he was capable of doing it. Okay.
But he didn't.
But then I kind of switched back to Usyk. I thought, usually in situations like that, the guy who wins the first fight's usually going to repeat unless there's a big enough reason to see things will be different. Then talking to you on the show last week, I called an audible. I was actually going with Usyk, but in conversation with you, I thought, you want to know something? Let me go back to what I originally felt right after the first fight. And I thought Fury would eke out a very close decision. And it was a very close fight, this time around too. But I thought Fury would do just a little better, like turning it a tiny bit more his way and eke it out. But, Usyk answered the bell in more ways than one. He kept that, after a little bit of a slow start, he pulled ahead. And he never let Fury overtake him. Whenever Fury would make a bit of a charge, Usyk would keep him in check.
I don't think either guy was as good as they were the last time. I don't think the fight was as good. Now, in all honesty, the stream I had did go out a little bit more than time to time, but not enough where I couldn't see the fight, but I didn't score the fight. All I can say is this. If there was 36 minutes of the fight, 12 rounds, 3 minutes a round, I probably saw a good uninterrupted 25 or 26 minutes of it. And in that window, I thought Usyk was a little quicker, a little smarter. As you said, he pressed it down the stretch. I think that was the difference. I don't think Usyk was quite as good as he was the first time they fought, but I didn't think he had to be. And I just think Tyson Fury, Jack, is at the point where I think he's lazy. I think his body is just, whatever was there is no longer there, and he can't will it back. And as we saw, Usyk is the better.
Wait, he trained hard for this fight, Fury. How can
I just can't believe that, Jack. I know it was reported. I can't believe that. I mean, the guy had his trunks up to his chest. There's no way he was in great shape. I just don't think he's capable of getting in great shape.
Weight can be deceiving, okay? Even when we were living in the era of the smaller heavyweights, no one even talks. When Jimmy Ellis fought Joe Frazier the first time, obviously Jimmy Ellis trained as hard as a fighter could train, yet he weighed the heaviest of his career.
201, right?
Now, yeah, 201, exactly. And weight sometimes, for a heavyweight, could be overrated. They don't have to necessarily watch their diet the same way. And I'll give you that. Maybe Fury didn't have a nutritionalist. He didn't have this, didn't have that. But I can guarantee you he worked very hard in training.
Jack, that's not what I said. I think he pushed himself as hard as he can. I just don't think his body is capable of being in any better shape than he was in.
But you're asking where the fighters go from here. If we're talking legacy and we're talking current status, those are two completely different things. Fury's legacy has to take a hit with the two losses to Usyk. It absolutely has to. But we don't know how. But we don't know how people are going to perceive Fury later on. I'll get back to that in a second. But currently, don't you think him and Anthony Joshua would be the biggest fight in the division still, because it's the most charismatic fight? It's a more charismatic fight than Usyk fighting Joshua, Usyk fighting Du Bois. It's the biggest fight, and this version of Fury against Joshua, we have doubt who's going to win. You're not the biggest Joshua fan, a supporter, believer, okay? Even now, you feel he's tentative. He might not have a chin anymore. But even you, Frank, wouldn't be sure who to pick, because you think, well, Joshua's chin might not be a factor against Fury because he's not really that big of a punch, even though he can knock a guy out. And you might think, you might even pick Joshua to outpoint Fury now. And if you would pick Fury to win, that means he's not through.
But Jack, if Fury and Joshua fight right now, other than them both making a ton of money, what does it prove? We're going to see two flawed guys that have both proven over 48 rounds that they can't beat the champion. So is it a runner-up fight to say, well, who's second? I don't see, and I know I'm the minority here, but I just don't see the allure of that fight because, okay, they fight whoever wins. They're both on decline. What does it mean? And the winner, where's he going? Is he going to fight the Coley?
I can tell you where it goes. Let's say things happen that we don't completely foresee. For example, Usyk might fight Daniel Dubois again. He might not. But if he fights Daniel Dubois, who's improving, you got to give Daniel Dubois a shot in a rematch of beating Usyk. You can't write off his chances based on how
I would give him no shot.
You'd give him no shot in the rematch with Usyk.
No.
Well, but let's say
he beat a guy, Jack. Dubois can punch, and he fought a guy who's tentative and who doesn't have the greatest chin, and he beat him. He had to put him down a couple times, but he beat him. I saw Dubois in there with Usyk, and I saw, to a degree, once things didn't go his way with what he thought was a knockdown, which was ruled a low blow, he fell apart. One thing we can say about Usyk is he's as tough mentally as they come, and there's no chink in his armor. He's not going to come undone. I don't see Dubois having any chance to beat him.
Okay, that's a heavy statement. I disagree. I would pick Usyk. but I wouldn't completely write up DeBroy's chances. If they met again, because I think he has improved since losing to Usyk. He looked really good with Jarrell Miller. You might laugh about Jarrell Miller, but Jarrell
did
Miller
look good
wasn't
against
a complete stiff, because Jarrell Miller did look somewhat good against Andy Ruiz after that. Okay, so but
Jack,
business-wise, but it's business. At the end of the day,
business
for
look,
them.
Jake Paul and Tyson was business.
But listen, they can Fury can fight Joshua. If he wins that fight, he could fight DeBroy next. And if DeBroy loses again to Usyk, but he comes up with a very respectable fight, he's still in a contender's position. And then Fury could say, look, I beat Joshua DeBroy. I want that little blankety blank Usyk again. I'm going to smash him. And you're going to have him fight a third time.
I don't. Again, Jack, going by me, what I think, I don't think like the normal fan. I know the fight would sell. It just wouldn't excite me. And as far as the fight that we did see, I think it really was apparent in this rematch, although we saw it in the first fight, the difference were in speed, where Usyk is just able to get off and sneak those left hands in there, and they totally disrupt Fury, and they break his concentration and his momentum and his rhythm, and then he drifts back out, lets Fury get set again, then he goes in again, pops him again with a couple good shots, and then he's gone. I just think he knows how to fight Fury. I think his speed is a little too much for him, and I think he's actually the smarter fighter.
Like Usyk. But Frank, you know who I think nailed it, put the thought in my head, reviewing the fight afterwards? Michael Olajide. He posted something that skill wins out. And that's what won the fight for Usyk. It wasn't that he had more heart than Fury. It wasn't that he had more determination. It wasn't that he was in better condition. It wasn't that he had a better fight plan. He's just a little more skillful than Fury. Usyk is the most skillful guy in the heavyweight division.
Absolutely. But I think conditioning did play a part, Jack, where as the fight progressed, Usyk could keep going and Fury had to pick his spots and fight in flurries.
But some guys, there are not many of them, they have a motor in which they never get tired. I mean, if they get tired, they can fight all night. And they've won all their fights throughout their career, all their tough fights by outlasting opponents. Michael Spinks was one of them. He would outlast his opponent. So he never faded down the stretch.
And he was more skilled than everybody in light heavyweight.
I was just watching his one close fight when he was light heavyweight champion.
Eddie Davis.
And in round 12, Davis was fading and clinching, and Spinks is coming on extra strong. If it was a 15-rounder, it might not have went the distance. But that's how Usyk beat Fury both times. He was able to keep going, and Fury couldn't quite sustain the pace. I mean, for one round, Frank, and they're primes. If you had to pick a winner, Joe Frazier against Jerry Quarry, one round they let it all hang out for 3 minutes.
Quarry could hang.
We might pick Quarry to beat Joe because Quarry could throw everything he had at him for 3 rounds and vice versa, and he just had a little more. But Frazier's, the fight went on. People
got better and stronger.
Yeah.
I think also, Jack, don't you think that with the emergence of Usyk and the way he's fought against Joshua, a guy 6'5", 250. Fury, I don't think he's 6'9", but they list him at 6'9", 280. And Dubois about what, 240?
Big guy.
In there. Okay, another big guy. I think he has shown that if you can box and you're, 6'2", 6'3", 220 pounds, that is big enough. And some of these guys, their size are almost too big. I don't know if you remember this, but Vladimir Klitschko would not spar Usyk in front of the press. And this is when, before Usyk was in his prime and Klitschko was pretty close to his. So I think the myth that the bigger heavyweight is so dominant, I like the fact that Usyk, Jack, has kind of quieted that a little bit, because I could see Usyk in there, and I'm not sure that he beats a Frazier or a Tyson or a Larry Holmes or somebody like that. And I think he's shown that the size of the heavyweights, the big heavyweights, the bigger heavyweights of the 70s, I think that's about the peak, where if you're much bigger than that, unless you're great and really skilled, I think it works against you to a degree.
Usyk is so skilled. He holds his own with anybody, because he's so skilled. I can't imagine anyone blowing Usyk out or dominating Usyk. You know, I just can't. I'm not saying there aren't some heavyweights out there who wouldn't have beaten him, some of the great heavyweights of the past. But he's too skillful to be dominated, Frank. He's just too good.
Is he more skillful than Muhammad Ali or Larry Holmes?
Those guys had certain physical attributes that Usyk didn't have. They had more foot speed, more athleticism, a little better dexterity. But I'm going to tell you, they don't. I mean, Ali could hit and run, and maybe outpoint Usyk with room to spare. Maybe Holmes could do the same, but it would be hard. But whenever they stayed to fight, Usyk would come over the top with punches, and he'd be landing his shares well. I mean, Ali would be tough to Usyk because of the movement. Usyk would have, Usyk would have to come after him, try to cut off the ring. That would be very difficult for Usyk, because even against Fury, even though Fury boxed, Usyk was able to find him to an extent. Even when Fury was boxing, Usyk would put on that pressure. But Fury's kind of a big body. It's a little bit different from like a Larry Holmes with that great jab. But Holmes was hittable. I mean, Usyk would have given Holmes serious problems. Maybe he would have even beaten Holmes. I mean, you used the argument. I'm playing devil's advocate to an extent here. I'm not saying he would have or would not have. I'm saying he might have. You've used this argument in the past, like who's a certain guy fought. Like in the case of Bob Foster, you admit all-time great light heavyweight, but who's he fought? And you kind of held it a little against him, which is okay. But I could say that about Larry Holmes. He had that great fight with Ken Norton in 1978. Then after that, who's he really fought? To say it's a no-brainer he would have beaten Usyk. Usyk was much better than everyone, not counting the faded version of Ali. Let's throw that out the window. Usyk is clearly better than all of Holmes' opponents after Kenny Norton.
But you could say the opposite there too, Jack. Usyk has never seen anyone like Holmes, and it's pretty much a consensus opinion that Larry Holmes has the best jab in heavyweight history. And I think that had a lot to do with his competition looking as mediocre as he made them look most of the time. What if I said to you, what can't Larry Holmes do in the ring? What do you say? I think he's vulnerable to one.
But I want to correct something. You're saying Usyk hasn't fought anyone in Larry Holmes' class. Fury was definitely in Larry Holmes' class. You're looking at the Fury who's lost 2 fights to Usyk. Before that, people were talking about Fury as being maybe a top 10 all-time heavyweight and trending towards the top 5. I mean, people were saying, because he's such a big man, they're saying who could do so many things. Now, the 2 losses to Usyk, he's become in the mind of Frank Laterzo damaged goods. He wasn't probably that good to begin with. And Fury would have been a handful for any fight in heavyweight history.
Jack, because of his size.
Yeah,
but Usyk is not a small guy. Fury would be a problem for somebody like maybe like a Jerry Quarry or somebody like that because of his size. But I don't know. I mean, we could go back and say, well, who did Fury beat that good? I mean, I know it's old hat and everybody always says that, but looking back, is this heavyweight era that terrific?
No, you can make that argument. Well, he beat Vladimir Klitschko. Klitschko was on the decline. And I'm not saying it because he just lost to Fury at age 40. Before that, I was at Madison Square Garden when Klitschko fought Brian Jennings, a guy you're familiar with from Philadelphia. And Klitschko only won 8-9 rounds of the fight.
Right.
He clearly won. But this is a guy who should have wiped out Brian Jennings. He
was on the decline at that time, no doubt.
And then Fury picked up the pieces, and Klitschko did lose after that to Joshua, whatever. But you're right. And then he beat Deontay Wilder. Wilder had a big punch, but outside of that,
But now looking back now, those wins don't look as good. That's why we have to wait until guys are retired. Looking back, if you remember, and you know this as well as I do, maybe a little better, that everybody talks about Ali. Well, why is he the best? Well, he was the most skilled, and look at his competition. But I remember reading those articles the day of and after the fight where the guys that he's looked at today as beating who are very good, the Ron Lyles, the Quarries, Shavers, or any of the other guys he beat, Chevalo, whoever, they weren't talking then how good those guys were. Back then, I remember Bill Gallo saying that Joe Lewis's competition was so much better than Ali's. Today, you look back at that and you think, well, that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean,
who are we going to look at today, Jack, that's going to look better in 10 years than they do today?
But I think the key in judging Usyk's greatness is this.
He's a great boxer.
He moved up from cruiserweight. Look at what he did as an amateur, okay? He was a decorated amateur, gold medalist, great amateur. He took it to the pros, great cruiserweight, and they transitioned into the heavyweight. And just the idea that we're talking about how we could rate Usyk as a heavyweight, and that's going to be his legacy from now on. It won't be the same as Michael Spinks. Michael Spinks, after getting knocked out by Tyson, no one even wanted to talk about his legacy as a heavyweight.
Right.
His legacy is as a light heavyweight. They said one of the greatest light heavyweights of all time, and he's dismissed as a heavyweight. Dismissed, even though he won a few fights against, decent opposition as a heavyweight. It doesn't count. But with Usyk, no one is going to hardly remember his fights as a cruiserweight. There's nothing defining there, okay, that we could look back on that people are going to remember future generations. But his legacy is a little guy who gave up the weight, put on some weight himself. He gave up 55 pounds to Fury, Frank. 55 pounds. And don't tell me it doesn't count because they're heavyweights. Why does it not count as heavyweights? But if a lightweight fought a light heavyweight, he gave up 40 pounds and he beat him.
Jack, I've always said that. Michael Spinks, when he fought Holmes, fought a guy that was 50 pounds bigger than any challenger he ever fought.
Yeah. No, but I'm saying if Roberto Duran, when he was lightweight champion, moved up in weight and let's say beat Victor Galindez, we would be saying how historic that is. We wouldn't even consider matching him with Galindez because we'd say Duran's only 135. He shouldn't be fighting a guy 40
But
pounds.
Jack, guys under 200 pounds, it's not the same. The increments are not as big. Usyk, as a cruiserweight, was 200 pounds. He's put on 20 pounds. If you're 220 pounds, you're big enough to fight anybody. I don't care how much they weigh. If you're 220 and you're all there at 220 and not fat, he's big enough to fight anybody.
Let me throw this at you. Deontay Wilder weighed about 214. So now, if I want to play devil's advocate against people who are saying, the Jack Dempseys, the Rocky Marcianos, they were too small, they couldn't have competed. They would have put on some weight. They would have gotten up to about 210, 212. Easily. They would have, let the weight, heavyweights do put weight on. I don't know how they go about doing it. The cases differ. So who's to say that a Rocky Marciano or Jack Dempsey couldn't have chopped down the Usyk? Not a Usyk,
I mean,
a Fury.
Jack, I actually think they had. I actually think they had this style. It's the one style we've never had to see Usyk deal with because it's the hardest style to fight. And there's only been 4 or 5 great ones in the heavyweight division, and that's the attackers and the swarmers. I think they're the guys that would give Usyk trouble. The guys that could pressure him and force him to fight and not let him box, like Frazier did to Ali, like Marciano did to Walcott and Charles, like Dempsey did to his opponents. I think they're the guys that would give Usyk trouble. But look, they're never going to fight. I don't like matching them like that. Usyk, I think, is becoming in the minds of many people. They're going to call him a great, one of the greats. I guess it's hard, even though 23 fights, it's kind of hard to argue against that. There was a list today, I saw today, Jack, on Boxing Scene that they ranked the best heavyweights from 2000 to 2024, and they had Usyk number 1.
Oh, I thought it was like an all-time list. It's the last 25 years of this decade.
They have Usyk 1, Vladimir 2, Vitaly 3, Lennox Lewis 4, Fury 5, Joshua 6, Wilder 7, Parker 8, Andy Ruiz 9, and Chris Bird 10. I can't put Usyk.
What's Lennox number 4? That's what behind Vitaly Klitschko.
All right, here's what he said. Lewis is the best and most accomplished heavyweight on this list by some distance. He is down in 4th solely because he fought only 4 times this century, with the first of those being subsequently a bench upset loss. And yet, such as his quality, that even that limited cameo was sufficient to place him in the top half of the list. A first-class champion whose reputation continues to increase in his absence. All right, so he only fought 4 times, but I would take the opposite and say the Lennox Lewis that beat Rockman in the rematch or beat Tyson or beat Vitaly would beat Usyk and Vladimir, who he has ahead of him.
The thing that I think people hold against Vladimir Klitschko is he doesn't have the legacy fights, the legacy opponents, the high-profile wins. That's the first thing that we look at, okay? And what were his biggest wins? And it's not his fault. I mean, he beat David Haye, he beat Samuel Peter. Were those his biggest wins? I mean, and that doesn't do it for people. I mean, with Vladimir Klitschko, was a body of work.
I will say this, though, and I agree with what you just said. The only thing I'll say to counter that is I don't care what era you fight. If you go undefeated for 10 years and 22-0 with 15 knockouts and title bouts, somebody in there had to be pretty good, and you have to be pretty special to dominate that long.
I don't know. I agree completely. As far as Usyk and Klitschko, you know, I wouldn't count Usyk out in the fight against Klitschko at all. I might favor him to win because
over Vladimir.
Over Vladimir.
I could see him outboxing Vladimir. I don't think he'd beat Vitaly.
Vitaly would be basically a hidden move fighter. I think Vladimir would present more problems than Vitaly because Vladimir,
I disagree. I think Vitaly's awkwardness, toughness, and physical strength and chin would be a problem for Usyk.
Well, Usyk, I'm not thinking in terms of him knocking these guys out. I mean, Usyk can hurt someone, but he's not the biggest puncher. I could see Vladimir Klitschko getting tired against Usyk in a fight like that. But Vladimir has such a strong jab, and he's so powerful. Usyk, you know, might have to pay too much of a price coming in. It wouldn't be like Tyson. He'd be able to punish Usyk more than Tyson Fury did. Okay? But I also know Vladimir Klitschko could fall apart at the seams as well.
Well, one thing, Jack, here's what we do know. I mean, all the other things are speculation. The result of that fight, to me, and I talked about this a lot before the fight, is Usyk, based on a somewhat, again, I can't say because I didn't score it, but I can't really see there being a case for Fury. The fact that he won a clean decision over him twice, I think that pretty much sets up Usyk. If nothing else, he is the best heavyweight of the post-Klitschko era, and that's when Fury took the title from Vladimir up until today. He has the best wins, and he's undefeated.
How many heavyweight champions in history have the amount of quality, I'm not talking about defenses, quality victories that Usyk has already compiled? 2 quality wins over Anthony Joshua. Those are very high quality. 2 high quality wins over Tyson Fury. A quality win over Daniel Dubois. You know, if there's a red flag about Usyk, it would be in the Derek Chisora fight. That was too close.
And that was early as a heavyweight, so he gets a pass.
Early as a heavyweight, yeah. But still, he's fought only top guys. Even if Joshua and Fury fought him twice, they were arguably the 2 best opponents available, even the second time around.
Yeah. Look, he earned it in the ring, Jack. You can't take it from him.
You know who might represent a threat? If I had to say a wild card out of nowhere, how do you say his name?
Martin Bakali.
Right, because he's a powerful guy. He'll come at Usyk. Maybe that's the type of fighter that's eventually going to beat Usyk. Someone who could just overpower him, go right.
But Mike Hunter beat himself. Mike Hunter could outbox him.
But that was a while.
You got to think Usyk could.
That was a while ago.
It was.
There was a point, and it's laughable now, when he was at his peak. I thought Joe Joyce could be a real problem because he had such a motor, punching nonstop. But Joe, that's when I said who were the Miami Dolphins, like what fight, I just nailed it. Joe Joyce. Joe Joyce.
I'd like to think they were even that good. I'm not sure. I think that. I think Usyk. I think his kryptonite would be a pressure guy that could get inside, work him to the body, and not give him the room to box and pick his spots like Joshua or Fury did. So I think that would be his kryptonite, but there's nobody around like that. So
you make a great point. I would have thought that Fury, for part of the fight, maybe early on, would have really taken the fight to Usyk. I had a feeling Fury was going to follow the Deontay Wilder blueprint. He boxed him in the first fight. In the second fight, he just took it right to him and overpowered him. I had a feeling he was going to do that with Usyk.
He may have wanted to, Jack, but
great point.
But he may have wanted to, but the problem was he was in there with a guy that had so many weapons and tools to nullify him, to hit him, to make him miss and counter him, where Wilder really couldn't do that. Once he pushed him back and he smothered his right hand, he really couldn't get anything on it. And you quiet Wilder's right hand, there's really not much left.
Yeah. It's a shame that Tyson didn't beat Jake Paul, because people would be calling for him to fight Usyk. How would Tyson have done in his prime against Usyk?
Are you asking me?
I'm asking you, yeah.
I think because Tyson can come in low and force him back and not really have to worry about his power, I think I would look, as of right now, I take Tyson, because I have no doubt in my mind that Tyson would beat Dubois, Joshua, and Fury. So I would take Tyson based on Tyson is a great fighter, and based on style, I would take Tyson. I mean, with him, Jack, sometimes.
So sure. No, maybe Usyk. Tyson had difficulty against tall fighters. Tall fighters gave him problems. I remember Angelo Dundee even saying before Tyson fought Buster Douglas and Razor Ruddock, he was on a talk show and a caller called in, and Dundee said Douglas and Ruddock are going to give Tyson tough fights because they were tall guys. Against Jose Ribalta, a very tall guy, he gave Tyson problems.
But Usyk isn't tall like those guys. Jackie 6'2".
No. I'm not talking about Usyk. I'm talking about Fury, Joshua. I wouldn't completely discount their chances because of the height factor.
But I just think, Jack, he would take Fury's heart. I'm sorry, he would beat Joshua like he did Bruno. And I'm not sure Joshua takes as many shots as Bruno did before he succumbs.
Yeah.
As far as Fury, Jack, I think he would get inside and just blast him downstairs. And eventually Fury would not be able to move and he would get him. I could see what you're saying, though, but Fury doesn't always fight big either.
Usyk and Holyfield, I would have to go with Usyk's skill level in a fight like that. I mean, I know how great Holyfield was, but
I think Holyfield's the guy that could get to him. I would still, if you give me Holyfield that beat Douglas, who fought Bo twice, or who beat Tyson, I'm taking Holyfield. But, I wouldn't bet my life on it. It's a legitimate argument.
Yeah.
And if you look at it that way, Jack, and I just basically said that Holyfield and Usyk, I mean, I'm going to try to be objective. I like Holyfield better, but I'm not sure that he beats him 3 out of 3. And if I have Holyfield in my top 10 all time, and I'm not sure he beats Usyk every time, Usyk's got to be in that conversation, I guess.
Yeah, I just feel Usyk had so much skill. He could have competed against any other heavyweight. No one blows him out. No one dominates Usyk. I mean, in Ali, the first coming of Ali can hit and run. I understand that and pile up the rounds, but he doesn't damage Usyk or beat him up.
No, but Ali doesn't beat up guys. Ali is not at his best against guys that don't try to kill him.
Every time Ali would get close to Usyk, there would be problems because of Usyk's skill level. So basically, it would have to be a hit and run fight for most of the fight, which Ali would be able to execute.
Yeah, that would not be a fun fight to watch. I think Usyk and Frazier, or Usyk and Tyson would be intriguing. But look how we're talking about him. So that must say something about how good that we think he is if we're talking about those fights.
A heavyweight. I mean,
what's that?
I mean, how many heavyweights to beat Joshua 2 out of 2, Fury 2 out of 2, DeBroy? He's already got a body of work. Think of it. How many heavyweight champions have had that body of work? I mean, I could point to a guy like Gene Tunney. He didn't have that body of work as a heavyweight.
No, he beat a lot of good. No, not as a heavyweight.
His body of work, Usyk, is already as good as Jack Dempsey's. When you think of it.
Yes,
probably.
And he's not done yet, Jack. Who's he going to fight next?
Well, the question's this with Usyk. I would like to see him retire. If he did retire now, I mean, how is he going to be rated? How do you rate him compared to 2 other unbeaten fighters, Andre Ward and Joe Calzaghe? I think he would have accomplished more than Calzaghe and Ward. Something about, and I don't blame Calzaghe and Ward for retiring, not at all. I mean, they made the best decision for them. Kudos to them. They had great careers. But somehow you get the feeling their career wasn't complete. To the point that
Usyk has better names.
Right. I mean,
Calzaghe didn't get Jones or Hopkins when they were on their game.
Right, exactly. And he got knocked down in both fights and shook. And Calzaghe didn't have quite the defining fight, that you could say Jeff Lacey, was a good win at the time, but then we saw how Lacey was after that.
And a lot of people thought Lacey was going to beat Calzaghe.
Yeah. But I don't know what more Usyk could do. If he keeps fighting, it's inevitable he's going to lose at some point to someone. And I'd hate to see him just lose a fight, and even if he regained the title later, you kind of like to see him bow out. There's nothing more to prove. He's made enough money. I mean, why is he?
He'll probably fight one or two more times, Jack, and retire. And you know what? I would pick him against the blind field to go 2-0. I don't care who's out there. So he'll probably retire 25-0.
Usyk was funny talking about after the fight. He said his son called him early in the day. He missed his family. His son won a judo tournament. Okay?
I saw that.
And his son said to him, "Dad, now it's your turn." You know what I mean? Like he put the pressure on his father. Now it's your turn to win. I did my thing. Now you do yours. That was kind of.
I saw that post, and that warmed my heart that the heavyweight champion of the world has his sons doing judo, because as you know, I've been doing that for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
And I love it. Although it's very hard and very taxing for an old man like me to be doing it, but I just love it so much. In fact, Jack, if I would have been exposed to judo when I was boxing, if you take the influence of Muhammad Ali off the table, I'm not sure what I would have preferred more. I really do like it a lot, but it is really, I mean, you can't box at our age, but judo's pretty tough too. But I thought it was kind of cool that Usyk's kids are doing martial arts and entering judo tournaments.
Yeah. But with the money being offered to these fighters, it's hard to walk away. Usyk 114 million, Fury 76 million. So if Fury was going to fight Joshua, let's say hypothetically, he would get at least the same 76 million. It might be 100 million that they would give him to fight Joshua. Both guys.
Well, that's amazing, Jack.
Amazing. But how do you walk away from that type of money?
You can't.
I mean, it's addictive after a while. Even though you have all the Fury should have all the money he needs to last him the rest of his life and future generations.
If the numbers that we're seeing are true, he should.
But if you can, after taxes, clear another 60, 70 million.
Who doesn't need 60 million?
And then you start rationalizing, well, I can beat this guy, I can do this, I can do that.
And he doesn't have an undefeated record to protect?
Yeah. And sometimes someone doesn't want to risk their legacy. Sometimes they will. I hear a rumor going around, which I believe, that Roy Jones is going to fight Jake Paul in March. I heard a rumor before that Andre Ward was linked to Jake Paul. Now, I believe Andre Ward cares a great deal about his legacy. But Andre Ward also might be thinking, wow, even if I lose, I'm making generational money for my family, and he's a big family man. I'm willing to take that risk. If I lose, I get a pot of gold, with that too. And he's probably thinking, if I get in shape, I think I'll have enough to beat this guy. But in any event, Floyd Mayweather, even if he thinks at this point he can beat someone, no matter how much money Floyd is offered, Floyd, I don't think, would fight anyone. He wouldn't fight Pacquiao. Again, if they offered Floyd $250 million now, he wouldn't fight Pacquiao unless Floyd wound up being totally broke. That's the only thing that would force his hand.
I think if they offered him $250, he'd fight Pacquiao. My question to you is, because I think he believes that he'll always be able to beat Pacquiao. My question to you is, if they offered him $250 million, would he fight Terrence Crawford?
Okay, that's what I mean. I mean a risky fight. A fight in which it's 50-50, whether he's going to, in his own head, whether he's going to win or not. I mean... And,
Jack, if Floyd fought Crawford and Crawford knocked him out in the first round, it wouldn't hurt Floyd's legacy. Even though he couldn't say he was undefeated, it would not hurt his legacy. Because Floyd is 48 years old. Or he'll be 48. He was born in 77.
We don't know what it's going to do for a guy's legacy. Look,
I
Roy
can't see him
Jones,
getting beat at 48, Jack, and them it holding it against him.
Roy, if you question someone who's seen them both fight at their best, Roy Jones and Floyd Mayweather, and you said who was better at their absolute peak,
Roy Jones.
most boxing fans would say Roy Jones. However, if you ask ratings of the greatest of all time, Floyd's name winds up ahead of Jones. Jones's legacy was hurt. Like it or not, it was hurt by all those
But
fights
he didn't
that
lose at 48, Jack. He lost at 32 or 33.
I understand, but you're using logic, Frank. I'm not using logic, and I'm not saying what's fair. It's just the way it is, guys. Legacies are perceived as being different. Even Roberto Duran, considered an all-time great, his legacy was hurt by fighting after the first Sugar Ray Leonard fight. Like we've discussed, if he hung it up with a record of 72-1 and the one loss against De Jesus avenged with 2 knockouts, and he quit then, and it just let his legacy play out. You want to know something? He would have a lot of support as the greatest fighter of all time, pound for pound.
If he would have quit after the first Leonard fight, he could make a case he was number 2.
People make a case he was number 1. And which brings us to Sugar Ray Robinson. How many great fighters did he really beat? All-time greats. I can play devil's
Who, Robinson?
advocate. Yeah, I mean,
he beat like 11 or 12 legitimate Hall of Famers.
Yeah, Hall of Famers, and I don't mean to demean it. Kid Gavilan was great. He beat him. Henry Armstrong was past his prime. You want to talk about the Basilios and the Fulmers. Robinson was past his best, okay? But the point is, they split a series of fights. Rocky Graziano, he looked great knocking him out, but, Rocky Graziano wasn't an all-time great. LaMotta gave Robinson fits in all their fights, but in all fairness to Robinson, he always gave away a lot of weight.
15 pounds, right.
Yeah. I mean,
but if Duran retires after Leonard and Palomino, that's big. But if it's before that, if you look at his lightweight resume, Jack, there's not really that many great fighters on there. I mean, Buchanan and De Jesus are probably about the best.
And he lost it to Jesus in one of the fights.
But I don't know if that hurts him because it was an over the weight fight. When they were both in shape and it mattered, he showed that he was.
I was actually at that fight, and
November 17th, 72.
Wow, you're good, Frank. But Duran, this was what was it, like 5 months after the Leonard fight? Not the Leonard fight, the Buchanan fight.
He fought Buchanan in June and he fought De Jesus in November.
Right. So if you're talking about 5 months later, it just, he was partying. It was the same thing that happened late on after he beat Leonard. He went out, had a good time, celebrated this, and never quite got back in the shape he was for like Buchanan.
Jack, think about this. What if Roy Jones retired after beating Ruiz? He'd be nipping at Robinson too.
That's what I mean. And the argument can be, well, Jones hardly lost any rounds during his career. You could make that argument, but guys fight on time. In Robinson's case, it didn't hurt his legacy fighting too long. People perceive it as different. In Ali's case, his legacy wasn't hurt. That's the perception. Okay?
But that's Jack. That's why I don't think Mayweather's legacy would be hurt if he got beat by Crawford in one round, because he's 48 years old and he'll have gone 10 years without having a real fight.
Okay.
As much as I don't like him, I couldn't hold that against him.
Let's take a case of Aaron Pryor. He lost one fight at the end of his career. His
last fight, right?
Bobby Joe Young. Okay? If he didn't lose that fight, Aaron Pryor would have been unbeaten for his career. And considering how charismatic he was, he would have been like the James Dean of boxing in the way we would have thought, wow, this guy, Pryor.
You think the Bobby Joe Young fights hurts Pryor?
He can't. We can't put him
Other than
against
him not being undefeated.
unbeaten. What is the ID card for Joe Calzaghe and Andre Ward? They're unbeaten. Give them each a loss, and no one talks about them as being an all-time great. No one.
Okay, if Marciano doesn't get the first decision against La Starza, you could say that too.
Absolutely, it hurts him badly. Badly. I mean, how do you justify Rocky being one of the best of all time? But his ID card, he was unbeaten. Like your 72 Dolphins. What made them, they were unbeaten. If they lost one game, no one would be discussing.
Jack, we have the example, the 207 Patriots.
Exactly. If the Patriots,
no one talks about them.
No one talks about them. Had they won that Super Bowl game, had their defense held the Giants in the last stand of the game, they would be the consensus greatest team in NFL.
Greatest team of all time.
Because they lost that game, how do you rate them on lists of, all-time great teams? They make the top 10 lists, but they'll probably be 6 or 7, something like that.
So being undefeated carries a terrific stigma with it.
Deception.
It really does.
To you and I, it might not carry tremendous weight, but to other people it does.
When I used to argue with my Italian buddies, Jack, that would love to tell me, and I should say my grandfather and my uncles, more so than my buddies, because the Italian factor would play a bigger role. And they would go on and on about Marciano. Now, he was ahead of my time, so all I know is what I read and the film that I saw. And I said, well, let me ask you this. Do you think that George Foreman or Joe Frazier would have lost to anybody who Marciano fought the night he fought them? And when you go through the names, they kind of had to come back and say, no, he'd be undefeated. They would be undefeated. I said, well, then what makes Rocky so great then? Because if he fought everybody they did, like them, he would not go undefeated. So the stigma of that, in a good way, carries a ton of weight. Think about this, Jack. What if Hagler doesn't lose to Leonard? Everybody would probably rank him over Monzon.
No. Listen. It's funny the way legacies work. That's what I was trying to say, Frank. In the case of Hagler, the loss to Leonard hasn't hurt his legacy. And something strange, had he been given the decision in that fight?
What if he won, though?
Let's say he was given the decision. I think Leonard deserved the decision. You feel that way, too. We're not debating that. But let's say if they gave Hagler the decision. It was a split decision. They could have given it to one more judge. I think it would have been a very unpopular decision. And people would have said, Hagler isn't that good after all. He could barely eke out a decision over a Ray Leonard who had one fight in 5 years. They would have looked at it differently, the perception. But a lot of people do rank Hagler over Monzon now. It's kind of split down the middle.
You're right. But I think if Hagler got that decision, he would probably be over Monzon more times than not. It's pretty even now. It'll be interesting to see how history treats them or that. But Monzon has the argument that he never lost a title fight. 15-0 in title fights. Hagler's 13-1-2.
Yeah,
no, 13.
People don't look at that at all. Hagler's charismatic. His legacy didn't get hurt with the Leonard fight. Look, Arguello, an all-time great, his legacy was hurt with the prior fight. You don't look at him as being one of the best of all time, Alexis Arguello, because of that. It's strange how legacies are perceived. Maybe Tyson Fury could convince enough people he got robbed the way Ali did with the first Frazier fight. And if he could do that...
Well, Fury had the better case than Ali had.
Yeah, well... But the bottom line is most people feel Usyk won both fights, the majority, and I think that's going to hold.
And it's funny. And Jack, think about this. Think about how close they both were.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of tough rounds to score in that fight from what I saw.
Yeah, listen, but Usyk, We got to go now, but Usyk was the smaller guy. Kudos.
And he landed the cleaner shots. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Happy Hanukkah and Merry Christmas, and we'll see you back.